violence. So there's an article I wrote with Dr. Kovach, Lisa and I put together. Essentially, it comes down to this, that people with mental illness oftentimes are put in a place of being accused of larger violent actions, larger problems, when the reality is that they're much more likely to be the victim of a violent crime rather than to be the perpetrator of one. So this article really makes that argument pretty strongly. So if you needed something to kind of push back on that around mental illness and the range of mental illness, this is a good place to start. First off, we make the point that mental illness is really a spectrum of behavior. And we think about it this way, that, when we might say someone with a mental illness might be dangerous, you could almost say back, like with an eating disorder, that they would hurt somebody. Like, no, like a mental illness. Oh, like dyslexia, like a learning disability. These are all mental illnesses. So one of the things to understand is that there's a wide spectrum when we talk about mental illness, what that means. So when we look at the wide range of mental illness, it kind of breaks down some of those arguments as we go forward. The other piece we see, and it's kind of related to availability bias here, that when something bad happens, as a community, one of the things that we look for is a simple, clear, and novel explanation to how to fix it. And many times we throw up our freedoms and say, just fix it. We don't want to have to deal with this. How do we make this better? So when we look at this problem, probability neglect, one of the things that we run into is we make an assumption that by dealing with mental health problems, we're going to be solving other problems like school shootings or mass casualty violence. And while certainly you can pull out some cases where these have some overlap, again, what the data tells us is most people with mental health issues or mental illness are not violent. In fact, they're more at risk of being harmed by others. But when we look at violence, it really is looking more broadly at a multiple set of risk factors, looking at some different behaviors that are occurring. So we might look at risk factors, especially around social media violence, as well as threats and the like. But when we look at risk, it's not, do you have a mental illness? It's not, do you have access to weapons? Those are a very small part of the picture. What we want to pay attention to, more importantly, is all of the risk factors coming together and that confluence of events. If we look specifically at mental illness and we look specifically at affective violence, violence that's driven by our emotions, we do see in substance dependency, as well as in thought disorders and manic behaviors, a spike in the potential for violence. The challenge here again, though, is we look at targeted violence around campus shootings or mass casualty attacks or the like. That's not the pathway most people go through. That when we're looking at this kind of violence, it's reactive. It's in the here and now. It might be a fight over obtaining money for drugs. It might be a drug sale that goes bad, or it might be something related to a perception issue that person is struggling with. Even when we look at that small subset of individuals who within the mental health collection have this higher spike of affective violence, when we look at that compared to all of the population, even then the major part of the population is still at a higher risk for committing violence to others. So generally speaking, I think, and even specifically in this sense, when we see mental illness, it's one of many risk factors that we attend to. We don't want to overemphasize that.